Let's say we had a graph with a positive gradient like this one I pulled out of my neighbor's trash can last week. We know what the equation for a graph and a gradient is. However, we're going to represent it a little bit differently. Let's look at the 1 and 2 on top. If point 2 is higher and further out than point 1, y2 is bigger than y1 and x2 is bigger than x1. This means that y2 minus y1 is positive, and x2 minus x1 is positive. This means 1 over x2 minus x1 is also positive since the inverse of a number doesn't change its sign. If the gradient of the graph is positive, and is equal to y2 minus y1 times 1 over x2 minus x1, and both y2 minus y1 and x2 minus x1 are positive, a positive times a positive is a positive. Similarly, if this point 2 is smaller than point 1 for both x and y, y2 minus y1 will be negative and x2 minus x1 will be negative. This means a negative times a negative is still a positive. Bearing in mind that we still have a positive gradient on our graph, let's look at an example, which also demonstrates how the position of the points taken to find the gradient doesn't change it. This demonstrates that the order doesn't actually matter in determining a gradient. Let's now do one with a negative gradient. You can go in whichever order you want for the points you choose, but you must maintain that order for the numerator and denominator. You can't pick and choose like you see on screen. You will get a wrong answer. Now let's go through the example. Notice that in this case, for a negative gradient, for any 2 points, one will have a larger x while the other has a larger y. This means for the gradient, the numerator will be positive while the denominator is negative or vice versa. Think back to the previous example. In this case either y2 is smaller than y1 or x2 is smaller than x1 in this case, while the other is bigger. This leads to a positive over a negative or a negative over a positive. The gradient is minus 5. We can now prove that a negative times a positive is a negative. This is what happens when you think positively when facing the Blair Witch.
Wait, Jai, you could get lost in there.
Think positive.
Chicken.
I'm positive you will get lost in there.
Double KO. You lose.